For many of us, it's hard to imagine life without a smartphone. I'm hosting a live television show and I have one in my hand right now. You might even call this an addiction, especially though for young people. Well, a pair of heavyweight Apple shareholders say it's a serious and growing problem and want the company to do something about it. JANA Partners and the California State Teachers Retirement System penned an open letter to Apple. The hedge fund and the pension plan collectively own about $2 billion worth of Apple stock. They're urging the company to consider developing software to limit children's iPhone use. They also asked Apple to study the impact of excessive phone use on mental health. Apple made more than $48 billion from iPhone sales in 2017, but the investors worry that Apple's stock could be hurt if concerns are not addressed. And if the existing research is any indication, the problem is very real. Half of teenagers in a recent U.S. survey feel like they're addicted to their phones and say they feel pressure to respond to messages immediately. Some have even raised concerns about a link to rising rates of teen depression and suicide. They worry that phones are replacing human interaction. So, how can we help prevent some of the unintended consequences of this technology? For more, we're joined by Jason Daniels, Director of Research and Support Services at the University of Alberta. Now, Jason, if I've got this right, you were involved in one of the studies that was quoted in this letter to Apple. Just lay it out for us. How serious is this issue?
I think it's a growing concern. I think that people are just starting to, grapple with the short-term and long-term impacts of something that's become, I think, pretty much ubiquitous.
So what then should we be doing about it, I guess, is the core issue. And I think, I've got young kids at home. I think a lot of people are watching this and saying you can understand the kids want to use it, especially teenagers. There's pressure and, peer pressure to do it.
Sure.
What should we be doing?
I think the thing that I think is really important, is mindful use. I think the more that we can plan our use and instead of just sort of it becoming the default, which I think is part of the problem, is that it's almost like it becomes a default and it fills any available time and any gap in anything that we're doing.
I talked to other people, Jason, who are involved in the academic side of this research. And I think in a lot of cases, people in academia in general feel that they write these reports, they go out into the ether, and what impact do they have? Here you have two of the biggest shareholders of Apple quoting the research that you did. Is it good, in the very least, that we're having this conversation and that it is supported by some of the academic data out there?
Personally, I think it's fantastic anytime that that the stuff that we do has an impact. That's what we're always hoping for. Two, I think anything that can lead to increased research or more understanding is always a positive in my mind.
Did anything stand out for you as you did this research? I mean, you go into these things sort of expecting to find stuff. Did you find things that stood out or surprised you?
I don't know that I was surprised necessarily. I think it confirmed some of the things that I think a lot of people kind of feel about technology. And I think that some of the research that we found, or that's been found looking at the concerns that kids have, I think can also be replicated in adults. And I think they have a lot of the same concerns about technology being an increased distraction in their lives, and that they are dealing with some of the same types of concerns that we see in the kids as well.
I mean, I think it was your report that was talking to teachers saying that they used to see kids go out and socialize in the playground. Now they stay in and just sort of, play on their phones or talk to each other on their phones. That must really have concerns about long-term just sort of social growth and understanding and that interconnectivity you develop in school.
I think that is, and I think that's one of the big concerns when you're looking at technology. And to be clear, I think there's definitely some fantastic things that technology can do. Things like FaceTiming with grandparents around the world, things like that. But it's those day-to-day kind of social interactions that I think that people are seeing that are concerning them.
Right. I mean, it's worth pointing out, you're on FaceTime right now. We can see the very obvious and clear benefits of this. It's something that developed so quickly, though. I mean, it was 10 years ago that we didn't really have this much interactivity with our phones, and now all of a sudden it's that hockey stick of growth. Are we at that sort of breaking point? What do we need to do as a society to make sure that we're having the right kinds of conversation around the changing way in which we communicate with one another?
I think it's conversations like these, I think, that really bring this to the fore. They're important, that we actually ask ourselves, right? before you hand the phone to the 2-year-old to keep them quiet in the restaurant, maybe ask, what's the impact of this? Is there something better I can be doing? Before you buy that first cell phone. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but maybe have a discussion about it first, about, what are the rules for using it? What are the implications of giving my child this cell phone?
The letter from the Apple shareholders is calling on Apple to conduct more research. What is the body of research on this like? It feels, from an outsider's perspective, like it's fairly substantial. Where are we in the data gathering of all of this?
Yeah, I think we're actually kind of at the beginning. I think things have changed so fast and are changing so fast that we're just, I think, at this point starting to grapple with some of those longer-term issues. I think we're understanding some of the short-term types of things, the impact on sleep and stuff like that. But what we don't really know is what are those long-term impacts. And so I think that's where we're really heading. I think that's where research will help us in the future.
No doubt. Listen, Jason, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks very much for making the time today.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Jason Daniels, Director of Research and Support Services at the University of Alberta. So, should Apple be left in charge to police its own technologies, or does it fall to the hands of the consumer? For more on this, we're joined by Jesse Hirsch, president of MetaViews. Nice to see you again, Jesse.
Good to see you, Peter.
Is this just an Apple problem? It surely can't be.
No, this is a technology problem. I think Apple is a very easy target, a very lucrative target, but Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, look, even Netflix,
right.
All of these companies are in the business of getting us addicted, of getting us to not only love their products, but be compelled to use their products perhaps longer than we should, and perhaps in a way that we shouldn't be. And I think that's the issue.
There's a line in this letter to Apple basically saying that we believe Apple would once again play a pioneering role, this time by setting an example of the obligations of technology companies, saying this would actually go to help their bottom line and boost shareholders' profit if they took a proactive role on that. Those two don't necessarily match up.
Well, except that I think that this is a design issue. And I think in going to a company like Apple with an incredible prowess at design, they're saying, maybe there's changes we can make to add balance, to add mindfulness. Because, look, this isn't just about children. I think the other dynamic here is employees.
Right.
If we're saying that people are addicted to smartphones, then employers should be thinking about productivity loss. They should be thinking about the way in which people use these tools to do their job, and maybe it's not the most effective. Maybe there's a lot of loss and wastage because people are so addicted to Candy Crush that they're not actually focusing on what they need to do in the workday.
If it's a technology problem, is it a technology solution? Is it an alarm that goes off on my phone that tells me I've made up my hour, 2 or 3 a day, or is it some kind of a central hub that will help me govern how much my kids use? Where are we on that?
I think it's a holistic solution. There is a role for technology and having those reminders. There's a role in parenting. Part of the request here is to ask for a parental interface, to give parents the tools to help them understand how their kids are using. The equivalent would be an employer's interface.
Right.
But it's also public policy. I think the analogy here is with medicines and drugs. Medicines and drugs are tested so arduously to make sure that there's no harm or minimal harm, and further, that they do what they're supposed to do. Technology is the opposite. We throw it out there.
Right.
And then after the fact, figure out, oh, wait, are we making people depressed? Or are we making a loss of productivity? So I think there is a need, not just for more testing, but actually to be critical of this technology, because I think this is part of the larger techlash or the backlash against technology. And in this case, we're just saying, hey, what about the children?
It's funny, though. Technology has changed our lives so long as there has been technology. The invention of the car has killed how many people over all these years, and yet it's our smartphones that are finally forcing us to have this conversation.
In part because of the effect it's having on our brain.
Right.
And it's not just the mental health issues, it's not just the productivity issues. There is an unknown. We are kind of evolving in the way in which we're internalizing this technology as cyborgs, yet we're not asking those critical questions. And I think the issue here is that we're not holding these companies responsible.
Right.
We held tobacco companies responsible, we hold alcohol companies responsible. I think technology companies, with that same power comes a responsibility, and yet they're shirking that responsibility, which is part of the issue.
And they'll, I'm sure, continue to shirk it at least until somebody moves on it. But once somebody does, do you imagine that everybody else will have to fall into place and have something on your phone that allows you to manage your kids' usage, manage your own, for whatever that may be.
Well, and that's why I think that this will benefit Apple's bottom line. It will benefit these technologies' bottom line, not just because of trust, but because people can then understand not just the value of this technology, but the value of using it responsibly, which is why I keep bringing it back to the productivity and employees. Because that's where I see the real scandal is people blame social media, but it's the tools themselves that we don't really know how to use, and therefore we're running into these sorts of problems.
I downloaded one of those apps last year that tells me how much time I've spent on my phone, and it just beeps when you've been on for more than an hour, and then it tells you again if you've been on for another hour. And more than anything else, it was remarkable to see the data, to see actual proof. I've been on my phone way more than I thought. Is that the first step, if you're a parent, if you're a user, if you're a kid, to just make sure you actually know how much, because it's obsequious, right? You sort of reach into your pocket, you're just checking, and it even tracks that, how many times it pick it up to tell you.
I think there is a role for awareness, but at the same time, I think we're all willing addicts.
Oh, for sure.
We love this stuff, and I think it's more, to you said in the last interview, about the health impacts. The research needs to catch up. Because I think if we understood that, we'd be a little easier of, say, not bringing it out at the dinner table. Or having certain periods of the day in which we are free of these distractions, so we can focus, so that we can do what we need to do.
Well, and as he was talking about, if you've got those kids that are in the schoolroom playing Candy Crush rather than going out and playing tag or soccer, basketball, whatever it may be, that's a society problem, and that affects us all.
Although let's not also forget that a lot of this is social. People are not just addicted to the devices, they're addicted to the human contact through the device, which is a whole other area of research, I think, that is a can of worms.
And has negative consequences as well. That'll be a topic for another day. Jesse, great to see you.
Thanks, Peter.
Jesse Hirsch, president of MetaViews.